Do you know what the biggest mistake is that people make after the age of 70? They keep living as if they were still 40. A mistake that has to do with wrong priorities, with toxic relationships they still endure, and with energy they invest in battles that have long since lost their value. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about staying active or vital. I'm talking about something that goes much deeper. This stage of life has its own rules. Look, I reached 70 a few years ago, and I'm going to tell you something almost no one says out loud. If you keep playing by the old rules, you will lose time that you can never get back. Today I'm sharing with you 9 things that simply no longer make sense after the age of 70. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you can completely change how you live these years. And believe me, they can be the best years of your life. And I'll already reveal number 7 to you. It's the one that is the hardest to let go of, but the one that brings the most peace once you finally release it. For over 4 decades, I have studied human behavior, relationships, and above all, this remarkable ability we have to unnecessarily complicate our own lives, even though they could be so much simpler. And let me tell you something, that after the age of 70, life holds a mirror up to you. This mirror doesn't lie. It shows you exactly what you've built, what you've neglected, and above all, how much time you still have to correct your course. The good news is, there is still time, but only if we stop wasting it on nonsense. The generation that is 70 or older today grew up with beliefs that no longer work. Endure at any cost. Family always comes first, no matter what. Dirty laundry is washed at home. Phrases that sound nice, but often led us to live a life that wasn't really ours. Today we clear this up. We speak clearly, without sugarcoating, because in this stage of life, diplomacy is the last thing we need. We need truth. So join me on this journey through 9 things that no longer have a place in your life. And as always, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and give this video a like so our wonderful community can continue to grow. Let's begin with the first point, and trust me, this one is liberating, trying to please people who are never satisfied. Do you know how many people at 70, 75 or 80 still try to gain the approval of their adult children who constantly find something to criticize, or the approval of siblings who have been holding old decisions against them for decades? After your 70th birthday, trying to please everyone should be a finished sport. And I'm not saying you should become selfish or insensitive. I'm saying that you have more than paid your debt to external validation. You have given enough explanations, tried enough to fit into shapes others created for you. I've seen it again and again in my practice. Older people who keep adjusting their behavior so others won't be disappointed, who don't travel because what will the children think, who don't enter a new relationship because what will the family say, who don't allow themselves a small joy because others might see it as wasteful. And you know what? Those who want to criticize will do so anyway, and no matter what you do. Let me tell you something that happened to me a few years ago. A 72-year-old patient came into my office completely exhausted. He said, "Walter, for 40 years I've been trying to get my older brother to see me as an equal, as someone who is worth something. I was there for him in every crisis, lent him money, practically took care of our parents alone while he lived his life. And every time we see each other, he finds a way to belittle me, criticize me, treat me as if we were still 15. I asked him, "And why do you still expose yourself to this?" Silence. The answer is always the same. Because he's my brother, because he's family, because I don't want to break the relationship. But here is the point. This relationship has long been broken. It has been damaged for years. Everything you are doing is pretending that something exists that was never truly healthy. After the age of 70, You no longer have time for emotional projects with no return. And attention. I'm not saying you should cut everyone off. I'm saying you need to clearly recognize who enriches your life and who only makes it more complicated. And once you recognize it, act accordingly. Because every minute you spend trying to please someone who will never acknowledge your effort is a minute stolen from your own inner peace. And believe me, in this stage of life, peace has no price. Life after 70 is no longer about collecting more approval. It's about enjoying the approval that truly matters, your own. But that was only the first point, and the next ones are even more important. The second point that no longer makes sense after the age of 70 is this: carrying the guilt of others. And now comes something intense that you really need to hear. You are not responsible for the failures of other adult people. You are not responsible for the fact that your 50-year-old son did not manage to move forward in life. You are not responsible for the fact that your daughter has divorced 3 times. You are not responsible for the fact that your brother never found his way. You influenced their childhood, yes. Of course you made mistakes, like all parents on this planet. Does that mean you must carry the guilt for every wrong decision these people have made in their adult lives? Absolutely not. But let me tell you what I constantly see. Older people who feel responsible for solving the problems of their 40, 50 or 60-year-old children, who continue giving money they don't even have because he's my son and he needs help, who continue taking care of their grandchildren full-time because otherwise my daughter can't work, who continue being the emotional and financial refuge for people who should have learned decades ago to stand on their own feet. And when I ask them, for how long? They look at me as if I said something inappropriate. For how long? It's a legitimate question, a necessary question. Look, I grew up in a generation in which parents sacrificed themselves for their children until their last breath. And back then it was normal. But an entire generation learned that self-sacrifice was the only form of love. Exhausting yourself until you're empty was considered a sign of good parenting. And that created an unhealthy dynamic. Children who never learned to carry themselves because there was always someone who carried them. After the age of 70, you have done your part. You have given, raised, guided, supported. Now it is time to support yourself. And if that makes others uncomfortable, then so be it. Because what we're talking about here is not just your financial peace or your free time. It is your mental health. It is your right to live the rest of your life without guilt. Let me be clear. If you are over 70 and still solving problems your adult children should solve themselves, you are not helping them. You are disabling them. And do you know what happens when you foster a dependency that has no end? Those who get used to others solving their problems eventually lose the ability to solve them themselves. I remember a 76-year-old patient who came to me completely exhausted. She said, "Walter, I raised 3 children. I brought them up alone after their father left us. All 3 went to university. For years I worked 2 jobs at the same time. And now, when I thought I could finally rest, 2 of them are living with me again with their children because they don't have enough money." I asked her, "Do you have enough?" "No," she said, but I can't throw them out." "Why not?" "Because they're my children." There it was again, that phrase, because they're my children, as if those 4 words justified everything. We spent months working on helping her understand something fundamental. Loving someone does not mean taking responsibility for them. Loving someone, especially an adult, means trusting that they can manage on their own. Eventually, she had a difficult conversation with her children. She gave them 6 months to find another solution. There were tears, accusations, and that terrible sentence many children use, "You don't care about us." But do you know what happened? 6 months later, both children had found a way to support themselves. And the relationship although it went through turbulence, was ultimately healthier because it was finally a relationship between adults, no longer between an exhausted mother and two permanently dependent children. After the age of 70, letting go of guilt does not mean selfishness, it means emotional survival. And that leads me directly to the third thing that no longer makes sense. And this one will resonate deeply with many of you, especially if you were the glue of your family for decades. The third thing that no longer makes sense after the age of 70 is being the eternal conflict mediator. How many of you have spent years, even decades, being the bridge between siblings who don't speak to each other, between children who argue over inheritances that do not even exist yet, between family members who turn every gathering into a battlefield and expect you to keep the peace? Let me tell you something. That is not your job. It never was. And today it certainly isn't. If two adults cannot resolve their differences, that is their problem, not yours. You do not have to be the emotional translator for anyone. You do not have to be the family diplomat who sacrifices their own peace so others can feel comfortable in their hostility. And now comes something many don't want to hear. If you constantly intervene in other people's conflicts, you are not helping. You are keeping the problem alive. As long as someone mediates, the people involved never have to learn to resolve things directly. I have seen families where the mother or father, at 75 or 80 years old, is still the emotional headquarters for the entire family. Every complaint, every grudge, every conflict goes through them, and they, exhausted but trapped by decades of habit in this role, continue to carry this burden. And do you know what happens when this person is no longer there? Chaos. Because no one has learned to communicate directly. No one has developed the ability to resolve conflicts without mediation. After the age of 70, it is time to step down from this position with a simple message. Dear children, dear siblings, dear family, I resign. From now on, your conflicts belong to you. I love you. I am here if you want to talk, but I will no longer interfere, mediate, or take sides. Work it out among yourselves. Harsh, isn't it? But liberating. And that brings me directly to the fourth thing that also no longer makes sense. Holding on to outward facades. Ah, the facades. This invisible monster that has destroyed more lives than anything else. After the age of 70, continuing to worry about what others think is one of the most absurd things of all. What exactly are they supposed to say? What precisely? That you traveled alone because your partner didn't want to accompany you, that you divorced after 40 years of marriage because you finally admitted you weren't happy, that you bought the car you had always wanted instead of leaving everything as an inheritance, that you started a new relationship with someone 10 years younger. Let me tell you something, people will talk. They have always talked and they always will. But do you know what they are really talking about? Their own frustrations, their own fears, their own inability to live an authentic life. I had patients who told me, Walter, in my family, we don't do things like that. And do you know what I answer? Perfect. Then be the first to do it differently. I remember a 74-year-old man who came to me because he was in love. Widowed for 3 years, he had met a wonderful woman but did not dare to make the relationship official because the children won't understand and people will talk. I asked him, how many years of life do you think you have left? He became quiet. 10 years, if he is lucky. 15, if he is blessed. Do you want to spend these years worrying about other people's opinions, or do you want to live them happily? 6 months later, he invited me to his wedding. The children did indeed frown at first. Some family members didn't understand. There were comments, but he was glowing. And he said something I will never forget. I spent 50 years building an image of what I was supposedly supposed to be. Now I am finally myself. That is the difference. After the age of 70, there are only two options. You are real, or you keep playing a role. And believe me, at this age, playing a role is exhausting and completely unnecessary. The facades are a prison you built yourself, but you hold the key. You always have. And here comes the most important truth. When you finally let go of the need for external approval and stop maintaining facades, you discover something wonderful. The only people who truly matter, the ones who really love you, stay, and the ones who leave were never truly there. But wait, because the next points are perhaps the hardest of all, especially point 5, which has to do with something we all encounter but few admit. The fifth thing that no longer makes sense after the age of 70, postponing dreams for the ideal moment. Let me be brutally honest. The ideal moment does not exist. It has never existed. And if you have reached 70 while waiting for that perfect moment, when there is more time, more money, more energy, better health, then I have bad news. That moment is long gone, or rather, the ideal moment is now. Because later, there may be no later at all. How often do we hear sentences like, "When I retire, I will travel," "When the grandchildren are older," "When my health improves." And so from excuse to excuse, a life passes, filled with things that could have given meaning. Pay attention to one thing. I am not talking about irresponsibility. It is not about spending money thoughtlessly or ignoring duties. It is about no longer postponing what brings joy, that which keeps your aliveness alive. I had a 71-year-old patient who had dreamed since childhood of seeing Paris. She saved her whole life, waited, planned, but there was always a not yet. Until one day, a heart diagnosis closed that door for her. She looked at me crying and said, "Walter, I dreamed of something for 60 years that I never allowed myself to experience." It wasn't the illness that held her back, it was the habit of postponing. And that, believe me, hurts more than the passing of time. After the age of 70, every postponed dream is a dream that may never come true. That is not pessimism, it is realism. So ask yourselves honestly, what are you postponing? What have you been telling yourselves for years? One day. Because that one day may never come. And that leads us directly to the sixth thing that no longer makes sense after the age of 70, maintaining relationships out of habit. This one is hard, very hard, but necessary. Because there are relationships that no longer give us anything, but only exhaust us. After the age of 70, there is no point in sharing life with people with whom you share nothing anymore, except nostalgia or routine. We have been friends all our lives. We always meet on Fridays. How can I change that? And yet every meeting leaves you emptier than before. There are friendships that exist only out of habit, not out of connection, and that too is a form of pretending. I have seen groups who meet every week religiously to repeat the same complaints, the same memories, the same silences, and they call it tradition. Yet the truth is they no longer accompany each other. They simply drag one another along through inertia. And I won't even start talking about marriages. Couples who have been together for 40 or 50 years but stopped feeling alive decades ago. They don't fight, they don't yell, but they also don't touch each other. They don't listen to one another, they don't look at each other, they simply exist side by side. A 68-year-old patient once told me, "Walter, my wife and I are two strangers sharing a house. I am not happy, but I'm not unhappy either. I just exist." Two words that should be forbidden after the age of 70. We worked together for a year, and little by little he dared to speak honestly with her. And the incredible thing was, she felt exactly the same. They did not separate, but they transformed their relationship. They went to therapy, made new agreements, rediscovered how to create connection. For the first time in decades, they felt alive again. And it all began when they stopped pretending. Because sometimes maintaining a relationship out of habit is the quietest way of dying inside. After the age of 70, every connection must bring peace, joy, and meaning. If it doesn't, it has no place. And if that means closing chapters, then so be it. Better alone with peace than accompanied by emptiness. And now we come to the point that for many is the deepest, most difficult, but also the most liberating. Point number 7. The point that separates those who simply resign in old age from those who grow older with true inner freedom. The 7th thing that no longer makes sense after the age of 70, seeking justice for past situations. This is the point I announced as the most difficult, and it is because we all, truly all of us, carry injustices, betrayal, abandonment, mistreatment, lies in our history, things we did not deserve, words we never heard, apologies that never came. And there are people who at 70, 75, 80 years old are still waiting for someone to acknowledge what was done to them, still waiting for the absent father to finally say, "I disappointed you," for the violent brother to admit his guilt, for the ex-husband who left them to acknowledge the pain he caused. Let me say something that will hurt, but that you must hear. This justice will probably never come, and continuing to wait for it means allowing the past to determine your life today. I have seen people consume themselves waiting for an apology that never comes. People destroying their final years because they have repeated the same resentment, the same story for 30, 40, 50 years, hoping someone will eventually validate their pain. And you know what? No one can give you that validation except yourselves, because emotional justice does not work like legal justice. There is no judge who says, "You are right, you were the victim, this person must pay for it." In the emotional world, justice is something you must create within yourselves, and this form of justice is called letting go. Not necessarily forgiving, not forgetting, not pretending nothing happened, but letting go of the expectation that someone will ever repair that damage. I remember a 77-year-old woman who came to me completely embittered. For over 50 years she had waited for her mother, who had been dead for 10 years, to ask forgiveness for the abuse in her childhood. "She never apologized," she said through tears. "She died without acknowledging what she did to me." And I asked her, "Do you want to die while waiting for something that will never come?" A long silence. "But it's not fair," she said. "You are right," I replied. "It wasn't fair. Not then and not now." But continuing to expect justice from someone who is no longer alive means punishing yourself for something someone else did. We worked for months on grieving this apology that never came, on validating her pain herself, without depending on someone else, on letting go, not because what happened was right, but because holding on was slowly destroying her inside. And when she finally let go, something changed in her. She did not become happy overnight. She did not forget. But she was no longer chained to what had been. After the age of 70, you no longer have time to remain victims of your own story. And pay attention to the following. It is important. Letting go does not mean that what happened in the past was acceptable. It does not mean reconciling with the perpetrator. It does not mean pretending that nothing happened. Letting go means it happened, it was unjust, it hurt me deeply, but I will not allow it to define my present. Because here comes the hardest truth. Every minute you spend seeking justice for the past is a minute you steal from the peace of the present. And one more thing. People who do not let go of their resentment age bitterly. They become toxic, repel the people they love, and end their lives surrounded by reasons why the world was unfair to them, but alone, because no one wants to be near someone who permanently lives in resentment. Is it fair that you have to let go even though you were the victims? No, it is not fair. But it is necessary, because the alternative is to spend your final years as prisoners of something that happened and can no longer be changed. And now we come to the last 2 points, and these have to do with something very concrete: how you use your time and energy in everyday life. The 8th thing that makes no sense after the age of 70, arguing with people who do not want to understand. This point is short, but incredibly liberating. After the age of 70, every discussion should have a clear purpose. If you try to explain something to someone who obviously does not want to understand, who has long decided that you are wrong, no matter what arguments you bring, then you are wasting time you will never get back. And I see it constantly in my practice. Older people exhaust themselves completely by trying to convince others of things that they simply do not want to accept. They try to explain to their adult children why they made certain decisions 30 years ago, or to make their siblings understand that their version of the family story is the correct one. They argue with sons-in-law, daughters-in-law, neighbors, or acquaintances whose opinions are already fixed, and every time I see the same thing, it is completely useless. You cannot convince someone who does not want to be convinced. You cannot make something clear to someone who has decided not to understand. Every attempt to do so is wasted life energy. I have seen family disputes that lasted for hours, stretched over days, and echoed for weeks, about things that will not change because the people involved do not want to change. These are circular discussions in which no one gives in and everyone ends up emotionally exhausted. And for what? After the age of 70, the rule should be crystal clear. If in 5 minutes of respectful discussion we cannot reach a minimum understanding, we end the conversation right there. Not out of cowardice or because you cannot defend your point, but because you finally understand that inner peace is infinitely more valuable than being right. If someone absolutely wants to see everything their own way, let them. If someone wants to blame you forever for something, let them. If someone categorically refuses to understand your perspective, that is their right. You do not need to be understood by everyone. You need inner peace. And this leads us directly to the 9th and final thing that makes no sense after the age of 70, accumulating things just in case. This may seem trivial compared to the previous points, but it is not. After 70, your home should be a place of calm and simplicity, not a crowded storage space for things you no longer need or use. Yet I constantly see older people living in overfilled houses with items they never use, clothes they have not worn in years, furniture that gets in the way, and yellowed papers that serve no purpose. Everything is carefully kept, just in case. But in case of what exactly? The end of the world, a global crisis, the day someone suddenly needs the kitchen machine that has been in the cupboard for 15 years. This famous just in case is nothing but fear disguised as caution. It appears reasonable, but it is silent, underlying restlessness. And from outer chaos, inevitably comes inner chaos. Every unnecessary object represents a decision one avoids. The decision about what is truly important in one's life and what definitely no longer belongs there. I understood something myself far too late. Open space has an immeasurable value. Emptiness has a transformative power. A home with fewer things, but the right, meaningful ones, is infinitely more livable than an overcrowded one. After the age of 70, you should be surrounded only by what you love and actually use. Everything else is noise that pollutes the living space. And when you finally organize your physical space, something magical happens. You also organize your inner space. The two processes are deeply connected. Now we have reached the end of this intense but necessary path. 9 things that simply make no sense after the age of 70. Trying to please people who will never be satisfied, carrying guilt that is not yours, being the eternal mediator of others' conflicts, maintaining facades, postponing dreams, continuing relationships out of habit, expecting justice for the past, arguing with people who do not want to understand, and accumulating things out of fear. But beyond this list, one thing is crucial. The years after 70 are not a decline and not an end phase. They are a completely new stage of life, and they can become the best one if you finally give yourself unconditional permission to live for yourself. All your life, you have lived for others, for your parents, your children, your partners, your employers, for expectations that were not your own. You have fully paid this existential debt. You have given more than enough and fulfilled far beyond your duty. Now the moment has come to receive, not necessarily from others, but from yourself. By giving yourself what you deserve, it is time to give yourself the permission you have waited for over decades, a permission that no one can give you except yourself. The permission to handle your time with intelligent selfishness. The permission to walk away without guilt from everything that no longer gives you anything. The permission to finally let go of what no longer makes sense. The permission to live authentically without needing to apologize for it. Do you know what the true difference is between aging filled with bitter, destructive resignation and aging filled with radiant fulfillment? The ability to consciously let go. Bitter people are almost always those who desperately cling to old resentments, to fictional obligations, to empty facades, to outdated versions of themselves that no longer exist. Fulfilled people are those who have learned to let go strategically of what does not work, what adds no value, what clearly no longer makes sense. I have had the privilege of meeting both types of people in my clinical work. I have met 85-year-olds who were full of life, boundless curiosity, and contagious joy. And I have seen people barely in their 70s who were already emotionally completely frozen, even though their bodies still functioned. The fundamental difference lies neither in physical health nor in available money. It lies in emotional health, in the conscious decisions about how exactly they wanted to live these precious years. That is why I leave you with a single, powerful question that can change everything. If you had absolute certainty that you had exactly 10 years left to live, what would you change today? Not next month when things have calmed down. Not someday when certain problems are finally resolved. Today, now. Because I have an important message for you. None of us truly knows how much time we have left. But one thing you know for sure, this time, however long or short it may be, is far too valuable and irretrievable to waste on things that no longer make sense. You have already spent enough time in life doing only what you had to do. Now the moment has come to finally do what you want to do. This was Walter Rizzo, who has spoken to you today from the heart. And remember this essential truth: life after 70 does not mean passively waiting for the end. It means honoring the time that remains with deep intention, with genuine freedom, and above all, with inner peace. If this message has touched your soul, if something in it has reached your heart, then I ask you for a great favor. Subscribe to this channel and activate the bell, because we will continue to talk about these truly important topics, about uncomfortable but necessary truths that can change lives. And please leave a like. This small gesture helps this message reach more people who urgently need it, people who are stuck in a life that no longer makes sense and don't know how to free themselves. Share this video with someone who needs it. It could be exactly the message this person has been waiting for. A big hug to you all. Take good care of yourselves. And always remember, it is never, truly, never too late to begin the life you truly deserve. We will see each other in the next video, my friends.